Hi there, Ainur. So my name is Ellen, and I'll be correcting this essay for you today. I understand that your exam is coming up, and so I wanted to get this to you as quickly as possible so we can help you prepare for IELTS. Okay, so let's start with your first set of essays about schools and whether they should be more entertaining. Here's what you wrote. Nowadays, the education topic is the most arguable and sensible. Most people consider that curriculums should be mixed with entertainment aspects, whereas others insist that the learning process is a main goal of schools. Both views have their own features, which will be discussed below, but I do believe that that approach learned by game is more suitable for the younger generation. Okay, you're on the right track with this. It does need some work though, so let's fix a few things. The first thing I want to fix is the vocabulary in the first sentence. We would not say that the education topic is the most arguable and sensible. It just doesn't really have the meaning that you think it does. I'm not really sure what you're trying to say by this, but I would definitely rephrase it to something that is clearer to the reader. Maybe something like nowadays, the topic of education is one of considerable controversy or of considerable debate. That's even better. Nowadays, the topic of education is one of considerable debate, and then the rest of this makes sense. Let's see. Most people not consider, but most people believe that the curriculum should be mixed with entertainment aspects or entertaining aspects, whereas others insist that the learning process is the main goal of schools. Learning by play, not game, that learning by play is more suitable. So those are the things that I would fix in terms of vocabulary and grammar. Primarily vocabulary, as you could see, but also grammar. And then your introduction is fine. So why don't we move on and see what you wrote in the following paragraphs. Firstly, today's children are completely different from the previous generation. Research from the Psychology World Organization conducted over the last few decades has been showing that children of the 21st century more sensible and soulful. Secondly, information given by games is far more memorable and can cause new interest in further learning. Thus, the education process should be pleasurable and be able to appeal to students. For instance, it is widely accepted that Finland schools, it should be Finnish, Finnish, whose, for example, it is widely accepted that Finnish schools, whose main focus is a friendly environment and desire of learners, I don't understand that, are best among other famous world schools. All right, so now what's happening here? You have some ideas that don't really create a very cohesive paragraph. So let's talk about why. I am assuming in this paragraph, you want to talk to us about why there should be more entertainment in schools. But what have you really told us? You had this whole thing here, this whole portion of the paragraph, all of this, where you're basically telling us about today's children, and you continue on about that, but you don't really get to the point until the last sentence. You say, education should be more pleasurable. So, what does any of the first two sentences have to do with that? Okay, you talk about children being completely different. Okay, so what does that mean? That they need more entertainment in schools? You really need to make this very clear. And there are a couple of ways to do that. What you could have done first is you could have had a very clear topic sentence which shows us what the paragraph is essentially about. So, for example, you could have said that there are numerous reasons why schools must introduce more entertaining features into the classroom. And then you could have said, one reason for this is that today's children are completely different from the previous generation. Now, rather than showing that they are more sensible and soulful, because that doesn't really help your argument here. And again, here you're having a problem with vocabulary. What you could have said is that they need more stimulation in order to retain their interest. All right. They cannot focus for long times on studying on pure academic language or knowledge. They have to do something else. They have to be entertained. So that's what you could have written here. Okay. Um, and then here you say information given by games is more memorable and can cause new interest. Okay. Well, back it up with some sort of evidence. You mentioned Finnish schools, but first you have this education process should be acceptable, pleasurable. That sentence doesn't belong here. So you had a little mix up. So you said here that it's more memorable and can cause new interest in learning. Okay. And then this sentence should have gone at the very end of your paragraph because you're wrapping everything up. And then instead of talking about this, because this sentence about Finland didn't really tie in with this, did it? So I would have had a sentence that supported this idea a little better. So information given by games is far more memorable and can cause new interest in further learning. For instance, studies have shown that children learned geography better through games than they did through academic lectures. Okay, so that's how you could support this idea. All right, so why don't we continue? You have here on the other hand, but that doesn't really work because on the other hand needs to be combined with on the one hand. Here, they go together. So on the one hand, on the other hand. Also, when you use firstly, you have to use secondly. You can't just use one without the other. So these two linkers don't really work. Okay? If you want to show contrast in this paragraph, which is fine, you have to do two things. Number one, you can't use firstly, because I already told you you have to use secondly. And you could have just said something like in contrast, which would have been nice. So let's try that. In contrast, the school is a qualified public organization with an arranged set of rules and systems suitable to bring up basic knowledge and skills to children. The main purpose of any school is raising a smart and wealthy generation who would be able to obtain more specific knowledge. Now, here, you haven't really supported anything. You've told us a viewpoint, and you haven't done anything to support it. It's just two sentences essentially with zero support. And so that's not going to work. Okay. You need to do a little more than this. You need to back it up with evidence, with explanations, with studies, with something. And you can tell that the paragraph is underdeveloped because look at the length of it. It's 4 lines long. In contrast, your introduction and your paragraph are even longer. So that should be a sign for you that you did something wrong and you didn't develop as much as you should. All right, so looking at your conclusion now. To sum up, it is true to say that parents majorly wish to see their children as independent individuals with a healthy mind and body without any fear and imposed opinion. All right, I don't like the word majorly here. And in my strong opinion, all mentioned personalities could be developed only in environmentally friendly conditions, which is possible only in schools with entertainment. Okay, environmentally friendly does not fit in here. That has to do with things that are not harmful to our environment. So that doesn't really work. That's not the point of this essay. So that needs to be not here. Okay. So I like a lot of what you're doing, but you really need to be careful with your vocabulary. Some of it is just inappropriate. I would have also put this paragraph first. The reason for that is that we typically start with the side that we don't support, And then as we get closer to our conclusion, we then write the paragraph that we do support. So I would reverse these two. And as I said, this needed a lot more development. All right, so let's move on to the next essay, doing an enjoyable activity with a child. Nowadays, a modern method of raising children is full of ambiguous and uncertain meaning. There is the frequently asked questions such as whether reading or doing enjoyable activity with children is more productive for better skills and creativity. As a parent of 3, I'm going to discuss both sides with supportive examples. Okay. So again, you've got an issue with vocabulary, especially in that first sentence. A modern way, I think you mean the modern way, would have been better. So nowadays, the modern method of raising children. And I didn't really care for this vocabulary because it didn't really make sense. Ambiguous and uncertain meaning. Ambiguous and uncertain mean the same thing. So it's redundant and you don't need both words. But again, it's just not really clear. What does that mean? That modern parenting is ambiguous? Is that essentially what you're saying? If that's what you were trying to say, I think you could have said it in fewer words, very simply, like I just said. Instead of saying a modern method of raising children is full of ambiguous and uncertain meaning, you could have just said modern parenting is very ambiguous. Okay? Or maybe, yeah, modern parenting is very ambiguous, is essentially what it sounds like you're trying to say. All right, let's continue. There is the frequently asked question, such as whether reading or doing an enjoyable activity with children is more productive for better skills and creativity. Fine. And now here, you said you're going to discuss both sides, but that's not helpful because that's not what they ask. They ask to what extent do you agree that activities are better for this purpose than reading is. That's what you're supposed to answer. And so this, I'm going to discuss both sides, doesn't help us because it doesn't tell us what your position is. I want you to locate the band descriptors for task 2 and take a look at band 7 under task achievement. You'll see that it says essays should present a clear position throughout the response. Throughout means from the beginning to the end. And so if you don't present your position in the beginning, that is in your introduction, then it will not be clear throughout. Okay? So it's one of the things you need to do in order to be considered for a band 7. So I'd like you to work on that. Let's continue. First of all, it is true that today's children are more creative and independent individuals in comparison with previous generations. Involving them in any process without their preferences and pleasure is impossible. Thus, to appeal to them and create interest, information ought to be given in a pleasant way. Furthermore, any teamwork and partnership with children are beneficial and build a foundation for their future. For example, according to the Association of the World Psychologists, sufficient child-parent contact significantly affects personal development and self-esteem and prevents them from the undesirable communication in adult life. What is undesirable communication? You act as if there's just one, the undesirable communication. Let's get rid of this the, and then I would have changed undesirable because that doesn't really work very well. Let's see. Now, where I read it and it read fine, other than the comments I already made. But I don't really believe that you're answering the question here. So you're supposed to be talking about an enjoyable activity. Doing an enjoyable activity with a child can develop these better skills and creativity. So you spent these sentences, 2 sentences, talking about this, okay, and then information ought to be given in a pleasant way. All right. So then you say, all right, so basically it feels to me like you're writing this paragraph about what parenting should be, but you're not answering the question. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, it's like you're writing about what makes good parenting, what makes bad parenting, and what parents need to consider, but that's not what the question asked. They're asking you something far more specific. If you do an enjoyable activity with your child, can that help your child develop better skills and more creativity than if you just read with your child? So this is what you're supposed to be answering. A lot of this just really feels very off topic to me. Okay? So I want you to be aware of that and be careful. Now, I got to tell you the truth. I'm not really a big supporter of having paragraphs like this. IELTS examiners would look at this and say this is not very good paragraphing. It would have been far better if you had had one introduction, one conclusion, and two body paragraphs. So you've got these two little paragraphs here. Not really a big fan. Let's see what you did in them, though. At the same time, obvious benefits of reading should be taken into consideration. Certainly, it is a timeless and most beneficial way of developing creativity and imagination of the young generation. Undoubtedly, reading improves spelling skills, boosts vocabulary, and the perception system of growing individuals. Okay, skills. What about creativity? Could you have told us something else? Could you have said maybe that reading has also been linked to improved creativity? More specifically, a Harvard University study found that children who read with their parents were able to create 30% longer imaginary stories when surveyed than children who did not read with their parents. So something like that would have been good here. All right, now you had this little paragraph here. The Organization of World Education Assessment has shown that children reading more than average ones, I don't like that, tend to easily express their opinion and take leading positions in discussions with peers. All right, this is very strange to me. It doesn't fit with anything. It's just an example sentence by itself. It's not linked to anything. So definitely this sentence, this paragraph has to go. And I would again suggest developing this paragraph, continuing to develop it the way I suggested before. This is an example. So if you really wanted to use it, you had to have a main idea first, and then you could have included that. All right, let's look at your conclusion. To sum up, according to my clear overview, that comma here, and I don't really like this language in my clear overview. I think we already assessed that it wasn't clear. So why don't we just say, to sum up, comma, it is obvious that both arguments are valuable and reasonable, but I would rather choose cooperative working and no, not enlarge physical communication. That's the wrong language here. It's the wrong words. And increase communication as much as I can to evolve soft skills, which is much more important in the contemporary world. Okay. So you should have a good idea now about what some of the good things, what some of the really strong elements, and some of the elements that need some work are. I want you to be a little more careful with your vocabulary. Make sure you're using precise words and words that fit the context. Also, be careful with your paragraphing. You're off to a good start. So, typically, these corrections, sometimes it seems, unfortunately, like they focus on the negatives. But since you're at your beginning, it's really, really important to know what some problem areas are, because it's possible you may have never heard some of these things before. And so I really want to just give you as much information so that you can write your next essays more efficiently. Okay? All right. So best of luck. I look forward to seeing more work from you, and good luck with that next set.